Hello and welcome to the Art Podcast with me, Chris Stafford. If you're joining us on the podcast app, don't forget you can check us out also on YouTube now. We are recording the entire show on YouTube, so do hop over there and give us a follow, subscribe, and of course share with anyone you think might enjoy the show too. And my guest is with me here in the studio. Well, I wish physically you were in the studio, Liz, because we've got a completely different type of guest. I think this is the first time we've ever had a cement artist on the show, and this is in season 4. I think we pretty much covered a lot, well, certainly a lot of genres around the art world, of visual arts anyway, and this came to us via a mutual friend through Natalie Watts and Gretchen Warthen, have of course both been on the show. And your connection, sorry, I've got a tickle. Your connection with Natalie is through your appearance on a reality TV show called Tough as Nails.
Tough as Nails, yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you for joining me. Liz Nichols, all the way from Portland, Oregon. East Coast girl, transported to the West Coast. So thanks for taking time to come on the show and tell us about your unique art. But I want to hear about the Tough as Nails thing before we get into your story, because obviously being on that show, a reality show, must have been a completely different experience from your day-to-day routine.
Yeah, it was very an unexpected experience. I got into construction through doing a pre-apprenticeship program with a nonprofit called Oregon Tradeswomen. And they sent something out to all their alumni saying, hey, CBS TV show is looking for women construction workers to apply. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, and clicked the link. And it was a pretty easy application. Just answer some questions, send a picture of yourself working. So I sent it off thinking nothing would come of it. And then they ended up calling me, we just would like a little more information, and then called me again. Oh, we'd like to do, an interview. And I didn't even tell my husband I was going through the application process because it felt so silly. It was like, this isn't a real thing that's going to happen. But I kept making it through different rounds of, getting cut. And even it came down to the last second. They really kind of keep the cast a secret, and they want everything to be, they don't want you to be expected. They want you to get thrown in. So it was basically, I had 24 hours. They were like, okay, we want you to fly to LA and film this show for 6 weeks. So, and even then we flew to LA, we had to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel. It was during 2020. It was during COVID. And I think they flew in 20 people. They only needed 12. So even then I was like, okay, what a crazy story. I spent 2 weeks in this hotel. They're going to send me home. And it was the night before filming started. They either came to your room and said, hey, you're on, give me your cell phone. You're not allowed to communicate with the outside world for 4 weeks. Or they handed you a plane ticket and said, okay, yeah, you're flying home tomorrow. So, it was just wild and unexpected, but so fun. It was, the premise of the show is you have 12 construction workers and you're all competing against each other in different feats of strength and endurance. And there's a team component and an individual component. So it's 2 teams of 6. You really bond with your team, especially when filming during COVID. It was the first strangers I got to meet in a long time. And it was just, it lent itself to a really tight-knit bond. And yeah, I had a blast. And again, it's just really funny to be able to say, oh, I was on a reality television show.
Yeah. What did you take away from that in terms of the life experiences?
It was eye-opening on everything that goes into filming a show. That's not an industry I'm familiar with. And I loved just seeing what goes on behind the scenes and all the jobs and roles there are and how everything works together. And that was really interesting. I think the friendships I made, it was, really bonded with your castmates and even the crew. It's 4 weeks of everyone's together all day, every day, kind of a high pressure situation. And I don't know, just leaving the record behind, like it's crazy to think, if I have great grandkids someday, they can access this footage of me. Like they can have such a real picture of, their great grandmother. So that's kind of cool. Just the posterity of having that footage.
Yeah. And was there a win or lose situation? Did you actually win? I took home some money with the team competition. It's a good show because everyone goes home with something. And because of the team element, even if you're eliminated from the individual competition, you get to keep competing with your team. You're there till the end. So I think out of 12 in the individual competition, I was 6th to get eliminated out of 12. So I feel like, pretty good about my showing. I wish I could have gone all the way, but. And so boys and girls?
Boys and girls. Yeah, there were six men and 6 women.
Okay. Equality. We love that.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, what an experience, because you come from an industry that doesn't really get much recognition generally.
No. Usually when I tell people I'm a cement mason, they have no idea what that means, like what work that entails. They always go to, so like brick? I'm like, no, like we're different.
Well, explain to our listeners, our audience here then, Liz, exactly what it is and what your job involves for those who are not familiar with it.
Yeah, so I'm very specialized with concrete. So we're called cement masons, but it's concrete is the material we're working with. So if you see people, forming and building, pouring sidewalks, curb and gutter, those are, cement masons. We're also called concrete finishers. A new high rise is going up. Every slab of a building, every floor of a building is a concrete slab. We are placing that, pouring that, finishing that. So yeah, concrete specifically. Yeah. So
our listeners or our audience here might be thinking, okay, what has that got to do with the art podcast? With this, we're talking about visual artists here. Well, we're going to come to that. So stay tuned, because Liz doesn't just pour concrete and cement, as she explained just then. She also makes art out of it, and some beautiful art. Flora, for the most part, it's flora and fauna, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And where did that idea come from that you could make concrete or cement? Which do I call it to be technically correct?
Concrete. So yeah, this is cement is an ingredient that makes up concrete. So the material is concrete.
Thank you. You're educating me too. I love that. So concrete then, where did you, looking at concrete every day, because it's a pretty boring material to look at, right? I mean, you can beautify, I'm sure, when you're paving, but how did you come upon the idea that you could make art out of this?
Yeah, so I think it was a slow process to that realization. I think had already been working with concrete for like 7 years before I started to make my own like small things at home. And it was just, it's such an interesting material where it takes on whatever shape, you can have any kind of form and it's going to take on that shape. It takes on imprints. I think it was, I worked with a coworker who showed me some like patios he had done, and he had used like real fern leaves to stamp into the concrete just as like a little artistic flair on this patio he was pouring. And that really struck me. It was just, oh my gosh, okay, that's cool. And I think the first thing I ever made was I bought a silicone form for a little planter, and I was doing a Secret Santa with friends, and I wanted to make something, and I've never been a crafty person. I've never been a maker, but so I just defaulted to the material I know best and looked up, okay, like concrete forms I can use at home, and found a little silicone planter form and poured it and, sanded it and sealed it and gave it to my friend as a gift. And it was well received, the present, and I enjoyed making it. And that was the first moment of like, oh, I can scale down this knowledge that I have and make things at home. Because usually I'm pouring, 20,000 square foot slabs, or I'm just working on a a huge commercial. All the work I do is commercial. So it's a pretty big scale that I'm working on. So that was the first time I really scaled something down to a small level and thought like, oh yeah, I can play around with this.
So when you scale it down then to a mold, if you will, right? So you've got a mold that you're pouring.
Yes.
And then you're painting or moving the concrete around and then painting it on top, right? The planters that I do, you're pouring it, I'm letting it get hard. I do some sanding and some sealing. And then it was my partner, actually, my longtime partner used to be a sign maker, and he taught me how to gold leaf. This is James. This is James.
Who's
now an
James,
electrician, right? So he's
he's an electrician. Yeah, we've been together for 20 years, and he's a very naturally artistic person. And he taught me the process of gold leafing, and it lends itself so well. I find that the gray of the concrete and then the gold, it just works really well together. The juxtaposition is really beautiful to me. So that's when I started kind of learning and applying gold leaf and playing around with that. And then, so for a while it was just, using these molds, making little things, maybe gold leafing. And then there was a leap of adding the plant material, botanicals. So I used to be a landscaper. I've always grown a garden. Even when I have rented houses without yards, I used to use my friend's yard. Like, oh, I'll do all your gardening for you. Just to have a place to grow things. So that's like a pretty deep part of who I am. And I started incorporating pressed flowers, just adhering them to making little concrete slabs, pressing flowers, arranging them, and making kind of wall hangings. And I rolled with that. I love that. It's the combination of, I used to work professionally as a landscaper. That was kind of started my path into the trades. So I just love that the two careers I have found to support myself are also what informs my artwork. And the way that they blend together, the kind of stark, brutality of concrete, and then having these like really like slender pieces of grass. Like I like the juxtaposition there.
Yeah, and there's endless possibilities, of course. Anything botanical that you can bring, grasses, herbs, there's all kinds of things you can bring to concrete. Yeah. Is this a fairly straightforward process then, once you've set the concrete?
Yeah, I mean,
come up with a design, right? You've got to come up with a design, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so usually I will have the shape of the concrete, and it's hard and it's set in stone, and then I will just have everything I've pressed. And it's, it can be kind of seasonal. Like I have a lot more material to work with in the summer when the garden is booming than in the fall, and usually I'll just press things that look interesting to me, and then empty my presses and kind of spread everything out in a big mess, and then just see what happens. And then in the last year, I've started experimenting with a new process where I actually roll out a slab of clay, and I'm pressing fresh flowers into the clay and then picking everything out, pouring concrete on that. So you get the raised, like a raised image of the plants.
Right.
And yeah, that's really fun too. And it's similar where I just I don't have a design planned out beforehand. It's kind of like what looks interesting. And because I'm using fresh material, that's much more, I go out in the garden right then and there and just pick things and bring them in and say like, what's going to look good? What's works well together. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And then sometimes it does.
And are you selling these now? Are you on getting commercial about it? Is that what you'd like to do?
Very casually. I did when I started making things. I, opened an Etsy store because I was like, that's what you do when you start making things. You get an Etsy. But I work full time. I have 2 kids. It's I'm lucky enough where I don't necessarily need the extra income and the dealing with the shipping and the packaging. It's
and that would be heavy. I mean, even a small piece is going to be heavy.
Yeah. Yes. Heavy. And it just started to take away from some of the fun of it for me. It just, the focus became like, I'm going to monetize this. And that, it didn't feel great. I have done some art markets and I enjoy those more because it's face to face. It's like, here, I'm holding this thing I made. I'm going to hand it to you. Like, I really like that personal aspect. And I don't have to package things or ship things. But again, like very casually, I'd say I do like 4 or 5 markets a year. This fall had a amazing opportunity to have an art show in a gallery. There's a new nonprofit gallery that opened up just outside of Portland in Milwaukee, Oregon, called the Toolbox Gallery, where their whole mission is to showcase the artwork of tradespeople and to, empower blue collar workers who might not feel comfortable in galleries or comfortable, in the art world necessarily, or, might not feel welcome. And I got connected to the owner through a mutual acquaintance, and she asked me to be on their advisory board. So I serve on the advisory board of this gallery, and she asked me to be the first tradesperson show that they had. So I had a gallery show and got to, see my work hung on the wall. It was an amazing experience. It was really cool. I don't know if, I'm going to lean into trying to find more opportunities like that, but I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed having the opening where I got to stand there and then talk to people about my art. I think I really do like the face-to-face nature of showcasing what I make. But it's hard, it's hard to translate that into a full-time livable income. I mean, I think you really have to do the website and the shipping. And if you're trying to, make it a career, and that it just doesn't really interest me that much. Yeah.
Are there many people, especially women then, that are doing that? I mean, do you see others around you that have the same idea or pursuing it as a hobby or even as a passion?
I have to say, of all the art markets I've done, I've never met another concrete artist. And I get a lot of comments from people being like, oh, I've never seen this before. So it's, I don't personally know. I've never met another concrete artist. I know they're out there. They're, but I don't think we're super common.
Oh, it sounds like you've got a little niche going on there.
Yeah.
And in terms of your day job, then, I mean, you probably get ideas when you're doing the boring part of your job, and you maybe look around and see all the flora and fauna around you and get ideas. Do you get inspiration on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And even like I picked my son up from a play date, and we were driving home one day this summer, and I had my gallery show coming up. So I was really thinking about what else can I make? And I saw fennel growing out of the sidewalk crack on the side street we were on. And I just pulled the car over, and it was, where the curb meets the asphalt. So it wasn't private property. There's all this beautiful, fennel that had just seeded there. And so I, pulled the car over and was just collecting all this fennel because it was such an interesting, the kind of like seed pod was such an interesting shape. So it's definitely like out on walks. It's like, oh, that plant I've never worked with. And
so when you sign your pieces, then do you put the Latin name for it as well? I mean, you get really botanical about this, do you? And write the Latin name as well as
I don't. That's a good idea. I actually don't sign my pieces at all. That's feedback I've gotten where it's like, you have to put your name on there somewhere.
Yes.
So
set it in stone, as you say. Once it's in concrete, it's there forever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk a little bit about your background, because it isn't an artistic background that you're from at all. You're one of 5 children. You're a big family, born in Massachusetts in the 80s, a child of the 80s, can we say?
Yep.
And now you mentioned now you're married, of course, and have been for a while, and you've got 2 children. You also are pregnant with 8 weeks to go, as I recall, and being a surrogate mother. So this is an interesting story, and I want to come to that later on in the show if I can, because it is important, part of your life, obviously, now. And it's turned you to becoming a writer as well. So we'll get to that a little bit later on if we can, Liz. But I want to come back to your childhood and what your childhood was like. You said you weren't crafty, so per se. You don't come from necessarily artistic background, a little bit from your grandfather, but not that much. So what were you doing as a child?
What was I doing as a child? I was very active. I think, this word is kind of old fashioned, but when growing up, I identified as a tomboy, and I was just, running around the neighborhood, climbing trees, playing soccer. I was very sporty. Also a book kid.
But were you?
Yeah. Like could read for hours, and being from a big family, one of 5 siblings, it was hard to have quiet time or alone time. So I remember just hiding in the shower sometimes so I could read my book. And, I was that kid who was hiding books behind my textbooks at school and getting in trouble for reading a little too much. So, And you're one of 5 now. There's Caitlin, Jason, Rebecca, and Johnny, right? So where do you fall in the? Yeah, I'm the second oldest. So there's my older sister Caitlin, and then I'm 4 years younger. There's a little bit of a gap, and then my brother Jason is 2 years younger than me. My sister Rebecca is 4 years younger than Jason, and then there's my brother Johnny. I think her and Becca are around 3 years apart. So
okay. So were you close to your siblings then? Were you doing activities with them?
Yeah, I feel like we entertained each other. Like close is a hard word because we fought. We were siblings, we fought tooth and nail. Especially Jason and I were the closest, being 2 years apart. So there's some like physical battles going on, but we also played together all the time. We'd put on shows. We sang a lot. We're kind of a musical family. We all played instruments. So we would put on these shows for my relatives where we'd memorize Disney songs and dress up. And so, yeah, I think that we entertained each other for better or for worse.
Yeah. It sounds like you really did entertain each other. And
yeah.
And I'm guessing you called yourself a tomboy there, Liz. Were you into sports?
Yeah, so I played soccer growing up. I did track. I was on the swim team. And then just, rode my bike a lot, bike racing with the neighborhood kids and wrestling. I remember I used to any pets growing up.
Any pets involved?
We did have we had a dog, but it was a Shih Tzu. It was a little dog. So it wasn't I think I asked my parents for a dog, and I was imagining, the big athletic dog that I can romp around with, and we got this little tiny.
But no horses, no ponies,
no horses. No, we grew up in the city. Yeah.
But you do have a new rescue dog. You were telling me now, Alfie.
Yes, Alfie. Yeah, we did. Well, my partner James and I, we adopted a dog just a couple years into our relationship, and we had her for 15 years. She passed away 3 years ago. And we were kind of okay, we loved having a dog. We loved Sadie, but having 2 young children, it was it feels a lot easier to not have the responsibility. Maybe we're done with dogs. And then it's been 3 years, and I started kind of getting the itch and, looking at shelter websites and look at this one. And trying to think about we could fit an adult, well-behaved dog into our life. And then my son Seamus started really pushing for it. He'd saying a boy needs a dog over and over again. So yeah, we decided to we'd start fostering dogs.
Oh, you're fostering. You're fostering her.
Well, we were fostering her, but she's here forever now.
Oh,
we failed. Yeah.
We found her forever.
The idea was we will introduce multiple dogs into our household, and maybe we'll find the dog that is, perfect for us. And So Elfie was our first foster, and she came, and she's about 10 months old, lots of energy, tearing things up. And I was kind of like, yeah, this isn't the dog I imagined us adopting, but the kids fell in love with her. And I just realized fostering is a lot harder than you think. Like letting a dog into your life and then sending it back out is tough. So we had her for 2 weeks before we made the decision, like, okay, yeah, we're going to keep her.
She's a keeper. I want to go back to I want to go back to your childhood, because your mother is retired now. She was a nurse, Kathleen, and your father, John, an quality assurance engineer. I'm never quite sure what that means. What does a quality assurance engineer do?
I'm not quite sure either. I know he worked at Raytheon, which is, a big company. And I know he started out on, factory floor, kind of like blue collar job. And he worked there. It's one of those things he got in his early 20s, and that's the job he retired with. He's had one job his whole life, pretty much.
And was he crafty? Was he, did he have a workshop and do crafty things that, anything that you might have picked up?
Yeah. Nope, nothing there. Both of my parents, if something needed to be fixed in the house, my mom had a brother. They was like, call Uncle Timmy, he'll come take care of it. Like, not very hands-on people. So I didn't grow up with that example. And also in my family, it kind of fell back to gender roles too. Like my dad taught my two brothers how to mow the lawn and work the lawnmower, and he didn't teach the girls. And none of us thought of it. It's only as an adult looking back, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Cause I feel like for the most part, I was raised to be a pretty empowered female, but there were just certain things that naturally, fell along. Yeah, there were certain tasks to do, certain chores. Okay, well, the girls do this, the boys do this.
Where did the interest in landscaping and taking that up as a career, or did you consider it a career or a job when you were like a teenager thinking about what you were going to do with your life?
Yeah, so in my family too, it was very much like you go to college, that's the only option. And I was a pretty terrible student. I think my sister was, brilliant, like in the top 10 in her class, full ride to college. And I think my parents just assumed this is how it is. This is how it's going to be. And that was not my road. I got pretty terrible grades. I struggled a lot. I got diagnosed with ADHD and a learning disability when I was 16 years old. I probably shouldn't have gone to college, but for my parents, and at that time, I think there was a lot of, societal pressure. It was like, this is the choice. This is what this is what you have your kids do. So I did end up going to college, but kind of like just to go. Nobody talked about what careers you could, I got a liberal arts education. I was like, I like to read books. I'll study English. So
this was at the Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts.
In Amherst, yes. And I, again, was not a great student. I had one advisor who was a saint, who pretty much dragged me kicking and screaming to the finish line. So I did graduate. And, I took some creative writing classes that I really loved, but I did not get any job skills. I didn't really get any insight on how you make a career out of a degree. It was kind of like, you got the degree, you did it. My parents were very happy, she did it. And then it was kind of that, but what now? How do I support myself? And I graduated in 2006. So, the economy kind of crashed in 2007. There weren't a lot of jobs, especially not for people who weren't very motivated. I just didn't know how to get in there. But I had worked on a farm between my junior and senior year of college. I worked on a farm. That's actually where I met James. We were coworkers on the farm, and it was so fun. I was outside all day, every day, getting muddy. I loved it. So
what kind
at
of
some
farm
point
was
I
it?
thought,
What kind of farm was it? Arable or
it
dairy
was
or
vegetable. Yeah, it was like, a mix of vegetables and flowers. And it was on Martha's Vineyard, and they had employee housing there. So it's kind of like summer camp. It was young people from all over the country who were there working and living on the farm. And we'd all go jump in the ocean on our lunch break. It was a very like idyllic job situation. And that really kind of helped me be like, yeah, this is the kind of job I would like. But yeah, we were just planting and harvesting, and then everyone took a shift working in the farm stand, so some customer service. But it was after college graduation. I was working at a coffee shop in Boston, not super happy, and started looking online for farm jobs. I'm like, oh, maybe I can farm in Boston. Maybe that's a thing. And was searching Craigslist, like farm jobs, farm work, and found a post for a landscape company. And they said, farming experience applicable, or, we will, this counts as experience. And it was a woman-owned landscaping company. And they just spelled it out, which I think is so important. Like thinking about feeling comfortable applying for this job and like confidently showing up to the interview. They just said, we hire women. I feel like in my, I don't know if it was in bold, but in my memory, it's this bold typeface, like we hire women. And I was like, okay, land, it's not farming. It's not what I was looking for, but realized quickly that farming didn't pay very well in the Boston area. And there just weren't a lot of options without commuting outside the city. So I thought, okay, I'll apply to this landscaping job. And I ended up getting hired. And the woman who owned the company was called Christy Dustman Landscapes. And Christy Dustman was amazing. She taught me so much about plants. She was just like a wonderful person to work for, and like so passionate and knowledgeable. And that kind of, for me, that's what inspired my love of flowers and shrubs and ornamental. I had been like thinking like, oh, I like, vegetables, they're utilitarian, but this is sort of like, oh, like decorative flowers it's not frivolous, like this matters. And this is, something I care about.
So were you, being a book lover, were you studying these flowers as well, getting to know them and the history of them and where they could be best grown in the country? And I mean, were you really digging deep, literally?
Yeah, no, I'm more of a fiction reader, so I didn't, but I learned a lot from her. She taught me a lot about, pruning and where you're making cuts to direct energy a certain way so you get the outcome you want. So I was getting a lot of information from the crew lead I worked with and from Christy, the owner.
Okay.
And basic design principles too. Right.
So this gave you foundation, no pun intended, but this gave you the foundation for your interest in landscaping and landscaping as you would. Some people think, oh, landscaping, she's mowing grass, but she's not mowing grass.
Oh, no. Yeah. It was, I would say, like, we kind of, would call companies, that just took care of lawns, we'd be like, oh, the mow and blow guys, it was kind of like we were we were ornamental. We were planting new gardens, very little grass involved in, her design plans. And it was more like, long time care. We were working in Brookline, Cambridge. We were working in these like wealthier neighborhoods that had some like beautiful, like really old gardens. So there was really like, I feel like Christy would instill a sense in us like, hey, this is a heirloom garden. This is a heritage garden. Like it felt like a privilege to be tending some of these spaces.
And at what point then did you look at concrete and decide, well, that could be something, but complete contrast to what you were doing. I mean, okay, you can see the beauty now of obviously creating art in concrete, but going from beautifying landscapes to a lump of concrete, what was the shift about?
Yeah. So it was really a decision about it had to do with like money and benefits. So landscaping, I was like, I love gardening. I was making $13 an hour. There was no health insurance. I had, this enormous college debt I had taken on, and just realized there wasn't a path forward to a real livable wage in landscaping unless I was going to become a landscape designer or open my own company. And those things like didn't really interest me. And I was 29 when I got into concrete. And what happened was we had moved to Oregon.
You were already married. You married in your early 20s?
We weren't married. No, we weren't married, but we were,
together.
Committed. Yes. And had lived in Massachusetts our whole lives. And it was one day James was like, what if we had strictly lived by bicycle for years. And I think we bought our first car together, and it was having the car was like, we could just drive. We could drive somewhere far away. And it was his idea to try moving somewhere different. And we kind of came up with a list of places we'd heard good things about, or felt like places we might want to explore. And Oregon, Portland ended up being the top of that list. I'd never been. James spent 24 hours there on a road trip, but it made a big impression. So we packed up everything we own, our dog and our cat, in our little car, and we drove across the country. And I found a gardening job. It was building raised bed vegetable gardens for clients. So we'd build the garden, we would plant, we'd maintain. And I was doing that, but again, making $13 an hour, no benefits, barely scraping by. And it felt like one of the reasons I love gardening too, or landscaping, or this physical work, is I always got really positive feedback. Like my bosses loved me. Like the vegetable garden company in Portland, they, called Boston to check my references. And they said, Christy, the owner of the landscaping company I worked at, said, if you get a chance to hire Liz, hire Liz. And it was like great for my self-confidence, like feeling really valued, but then at the same time, spiraling slowly into debt. It was this really frustrating, like, I know I'm valued as a worker. I know I have these skills. I know that people want me there, but why can't I make a living out of this? Like, it was a very kind of, anyone who's been in that situation, no, it's just like frustrating. Like, you feel like you're doing the right things, but you're not getting ahead. You're going backwards. So I was working that job, living in Portland, Oregon. And in the winter, I would work at coffee shops, like when gardening work slowed down. And there was a customer, she was a female electrician who I started talking to one day. And I think just voicing those frustrations and talking about how I loved, manual labor. And she's the one who was like, get into the trades, join a union. The pay is there. The benefits are there. And she told me about this organization called Oregon Tradeswomen and their pre-apprenticeship program they put on for women, completely free. It was a 7-week training program where you're learning the basics. You're learning some carpentry skills, you're working out, you're brushing up on math. It was just like a really comprehensive program. And they were also taking you on field trips to different job sites and union halls to learn what options were out there. And it was amazing. I had never heard of any of these jobs, like the sheet metal union, the electricians, the carpenters, the obvious ones you've heard of, but like cement masons, glaziers, like the people who are putting in glass windows. There just were all of these opportunities that I had never known about. And they all had really good living wages, really good health insurance, pension plans. It was this like light bulb moment of like, why did everyone push me to go to college and take on this huge amount of debt and graduate with no skills when I could have been doing this from the very beginning? It was just kind of like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. So I applied to Oregon Tradeswomen. I did their pre-apprenticeship program, and then I didn't care what trade I got into. I was 29 at the time. I knew I wanted to have kids. I felt so behind. I knew I wanted to own a home. There were all these things where I felt behind. I was like, I just want to get in there and start working and like making a good wage and putting money towards retirement. Like, I was just so ready to go. And the electricians, it was a pretty long application process. You might get put on a wait list. They didn't know when they'd get you out. Carpenters, similar. There's kind of a wait list at the time. And the cement masons were like, we could have you on a job site Monday. And I wasn't smart enough to stop and think, like, why is that? I was just like, sign me up. So I joined the cement masons, joined their apprenticeship.
Were there any other women doing that when you joined?
Yeah, so I think at that time, I think there were like maybe 4 or 5 women in the whole union. I mean, right now, 13 years later, I think we have 675 members and 20 women. So it has, quadrupled, but it's still pretty sad. It's a sad percentage. But I was lucky enough where my very first job, my foreman was the only time in 13 years I had a foreman, I had a crew lead who was a woman. So I didn't know how lucky I was at the time to stumble onto that crew, because it was just like, oh, Haley can do it. Mm-hmm. I can do it.
So was she kind of a mentor to you then, Liz?
She was. I had to win her over, and she did. I mean, I won her over pretty quickly.
If she was listening to this, if she was watching this, then what would she say? I'm wondering. Oh, she'd she loved me. She passed away sadly a couple years ago, but she'd be like, I love Liz. But there was a moment, it only took a couple weeks to win her over, but there was a moment where and I think this is sadly can be common in construction, is when you're a woman and you're successful, the guys around you go from women can't do this to, oh, okay, you can do this. There's something special about you, but women can't do this, but you can do this. And there's some women who really internalize that as like, I'm special, I'm different. It's like an internal sexism. And she definitely like had a little bit of that going on. And she told me that she was very disappointed to hear she was getting a female apprentice. And her quote, when she told me, she was like, yeah, I was like, oh, taking a job away from a good man. She told me this in a conversation there's no women supporting women then in her books.
No, not at that point. But again, it only took me a couple weeks. I mean, I won her over. I know she was very happy to have me there. And then she was my biggest advocate, but she did have to have that moment of like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not special. Like, oh yeah, other women can do this too. Like,
I would imagine
it can become such part of your identity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so male dominated, isn't it? Construction. You only ever think of men, knowing there are women and more women, and we see them on social media, just like yourself. And I'm wondering how difficult that journey was for you, aside from having your female foreman, but working with men constantly and having to prove yourself. Was it an uphill battle?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I feel like I almost have like an abusive relationship with construction, where like I am so indebted to my trade. I'm so indebted to the people who taught me my trade. It did change my life. Like I do own a home. I had the health insurance to have my children. I am going to retire someday. Like I have gotten so much out of this path, but then at the same time, the longer I'm in, the more the hard parts kind of get compounded. And I'm really, I mean, I feel like in the last couple of years, I've really had to start to look back and think about the hard stuff. And, it is like, you do have to show up in a space where everybody doubts you. Everybody thinks you're there to, check a diversity box. No one believes in you. And then you prove yourself and, my crew is great. And then you go on to the next job and you just have to start that. No matter how long you're in, you're starting that process over like each and every time. And, there was a lot of like feeling like, especially as, a woman in my 20s being like sexualized on the job site and just having to like laugh things off or let things roll off my shoulder, that in any other situation, I would not. But, you're an apprentice, you're bottom of the totem pole, and the whole culture functions in a certain way where you can't just walk in there and I think now, 12 years later, I've seen progress. I've seen change. I think there's a lot more like, hey, dude, you can't say that, or like, hey, that's not okay. But I think back when I started, it was more like, this is how we joke around. This is how the culture is. Like, I couldn't, as a newbie, walk in there and be like, it's not okay to make that joke. It's not okay to do that. Like especially being an apprentice, just feeling like I had no power. And, so it was hard. You know, I'm a pretty liberal person. I like to speak my mind. I like to speak up if I hear something that I don't think is right. And it was just a lot of suppressing that, and a lot of, I don't know if that makes sense, or getting across. Yeah, it was a lot of kind of shoving down my values to be able to
compromise,
feel safe. Yeah, to be able to feel safe, and to be able to have people want me there and invest in me. And
in terms of the people that want to invest in you, I'm curious as to whether the guys that you were working with and maybe went from one job to another with, whether they eventually developed a respect for you and supported you with a new crew.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I have had. It's like the worst stories I have. I always say there's the 90% and there's the 10%. There's the 90% of men I have worked with who have been cheerleaders for me, who have, pushed me to learn, to be like, I know you can do that. And then, there's the 10%, and unfortunately, the 10% are like, some of those stories are so terrible that they sometimes speak louder. The 10% just seems louder than the 90. So I really have to remember, no, I had like a lot of people who, I feel like invested in me. I had one guy who's like, oh, I told my dad about you. His dad, he was a second generation finisher. And he's like, I told my dad about you, and he wants to give you some of his old tools. Like, there were these moments where it was like really touching and beautiful. So I definitely have had so much support throughout my career from the men that I've worked with. And, had some really good conversations, especially like once I journeyed out, once I'd been in the trade for a while, once I knew that like my spot was really secure, it just got easier to kind of push back. And I've had some good conversations where, I had a coworker who's complaining about affirmative action and, this and that. And like, it's white men who are really in the tough spot. And, I just kind of got to bring up like, hey, when you met me, did you think I could do this job? And he was like really honest, like, oh, no, probably not. And I'm like, okay, have you seen, the people who doubt me just because of what I look like? And he's like, well, yeah. And I know he respects, the crap out of me. Like, he thinks I'm a badass. So I, was like, hey, like, maybe there were times, certain jobs that I got my foot in the door because of some diversity quotas, or because, that helps me get my foot in the door, but I still had to build my career. I still had to do this on my own. And that door might not have, I was like, that door was open to you. Everyone looked at you and you're 6 feet tall and you're muscled and tattooed. And they were like, yeah, he can do this. And I'm not getting that. People look at me and make these assumptions. And if I need to get my foot in the door, like that's a good thing in my opinion. And he, like, he got it. He was like, oh, okay, you're kind of changing my mind. So he was able to, like, I've been able to have more of those conversations now that I'm at a point where I feel like I have built this reputation where people respect me. And
well, you were on the reality show Tough as Nails, for a reason. It's a very physical job that you have. I'm wondering if you have to get fit for your job, or the job gets you fit.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, it was the job got me fit. Like, that's all I needed. And I was, I just remember, being at the grocery store and the checkout person being like, what's your workout routine? And I'm like, I just work my job, like, because I have these chiseled biceps. But as I get older, like, I'm in my 40s now, it's more like I have to focus on strengthening my core. Like, I have to do some strength training at home to kind of stay limber. Like, so it used to just be like the job was enough. And I've always, run, I'm training for races. Like, I did enough just on my own that, like, I was covered, but I'm finding now as I age, I have to be a little bit more focused in how I'm working out and strengthening outside of work for sure.
And now, of course, as we mentioned earlier, you are pregnant with 8 weeks to go, 2 months left to go. You already have 2 children, Rowan, who's now 4, and Seamus, who's coming 9 years old now, boy and a girl. Mm-hmm. And you've been with James now, as you say, 20 years. And then along comes this opportunity, which for someone with an established life as you have, a career, a partner, a family, and a home, and very established, and having time now to be more creative with your concrete art, which is a developing outlet, which I think is great fun and endless potential there. But along comes this opportunity that I'm wondering if you sought it or it sought you to become a surrogate mother, which I will say is not for everyone. And for those who maybe are not familiar with the scenario, if you could just give us the ABC for those who are listening who don't quite understand what it means to be a surrogate mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm a gestational surrogate, which means I am not related to this baby I'm carrying. It was a donor egg and, the dad's sperm, and I went through IVF. It was implanted in my body. So I'm just I think of myself as like a long-term babysitter, sort of caretaker. I'm growing this child, but I am not related to this child genetically in any way. I found this path. There was someone who I actually went through the Oregon Tradeswomen pre-apprenticeship with this woman who briefly became a cement mason. She dropped out of the program, but we stayed, I followed her on Instagram, was connected to her very from afar, but she, about 10 years ago was a gestational surrogate and started posting about her journey online. And that's the first I'd ever heard of it, but I was just immediately like, what is this? There was like a spark there. And I started researching gestational surrogacy, and it's something, there's people, the agency I'm working with a surrogacy agency that matched me with a couple. They only work with people who cannot have children for medical reasons, or like this baby is for 2 dads. So nobody has a uterus. They need to use a surrogate. So it's all people. It's not, I think people have an idea of like, oh, it's a rich celebrity who doesn't want to ruin their body or something, or like, but the agency I work with, it's just people who have tried, there's medical reasons that make it so they are unable to have children. And sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. It was such a long path to get here, because it was about 10 years ago I started thinking about it. Then I had, I had my first child, and I did have a easy pregnancy. I worked up until 3 weeks before my due date, like doing very physical work. And it just sort of reinforced, like, I'm like, this is something I can do. This is something my body was made to do. I'm one of 5 kids. My mom had all 5, natural births. She's one of 8 children. I'm one of 25 grandchildren just on that side. Like, it was just, like, my family growing up, it just really reinforced the, like, this is what women's bodies are meant to do. My mom would always say, like, the strongest, most powerful I ever felt was when I was pregnant or when I was giving birth. Like, I just grew up with this idea that, like, this is what I was built for. And
so you feel very strong. I mean, you feel, obviously you're very fit with your work, but you feel physically very strong
physically very strong. I have, and also, like, just, the end gets tough. I'm kind of in that end part where I'm like, oh yeah, this is where it gets hard. Like, I'm out of breath. I'm huge. There's heartburn. But like, up until this point, I have pretty easy pregnancies. I feel very energized when I'm pregnant. I feel like I have a lot of creative energy. It's also, when you're a surrogate, there's compensation. It's $50,000 that you get for carrying this baby for 10 months and going through the IVF process. And I, for a long time, working full time and taking care of 2 children, and just being in the slog of, how do you have enough hours in the day? I've always been like, well, someday I'll be a surrogate and I'm going to use that money to, take a sabbatical. And it just always sort of was this idea that germinated. I was thinking about it after I had Seamus. We weren't sure if we wanted a second child, so it's not something I ever followed through with, but the idea was always there. I was always kind of like, this is something I want to do someday. And then, we decided to have Rowan, and I kept working. And then suddenly I was 41, which is the cutoff. I think it's like you can be a surrogate up until then, and then the agencies aren't interested in you. So I had a moment last year. I was like, okay, it's now or never on this, and sat James down and we had the conversation, and he was a little bit more skeptical or like resistant to the idea. But once I kind of talked about like the freedom I felt like it would give us, and the ability to take time off from work, or if I decided to keep working, the ability to like sort of have this like emergency nest egg we've never had before. It just, to me, the money was worth it. And then also it was just, I just couldn't shake the idea of like, I want to do this for someone. Like I want to do this for the family. And it has been such a magical experience, like getting to know the dads of this baby. They're just wonderful human beings. And they're so thankful. The relationship, it's hard to describe, like the intimacy of the relationship when you're growing someone's baby is like really special and beautiful, and like nothing about it feels transactional. I know there's some strong feelings about surrogacy out there. I did write an article about the process, and, a couple of the comments were comparing me to like a prostitute, or like, people get focused on the money or think this is just a transaction, or like women are going to get exploited. It's sort of, there's conservative people who are against it. There's liberal people who are against it. And I think that there does, exist a power dynamic if it's not done right, and it's not done safely, and it's not done, through an agency who has your back. There is the opportunity for women to be taken advantage of in some way. But I have felt like so safe and beautiful through this whole process. Like it's just been really cool.
And you mentioned there that you started writing about it. So your published paper can read the story. Remind us what the story is actually called, Liz.
Yeah, so I didn't title it. The newspaper kind of gave it a clickbaity title, but I wrote an essay about the decision to become a surrogate, and they titled it "Why I'm Giving Birth to Someone Else's Baby." But yeah, I published this personal essay in the Boston Globe. It's the first time I've had a piece of writing published, so it was really exciting. And yeah, I took an essay writing class this fall, and this kind of came about my final project for that class. And it was in workshopping it in class. A couple of classmates were like, "You should try and submit this," and so I did.
So together with your writing, your pregnancy, and with the artwork, I'm wondering if in the future, if there's an opportunity for you to combine your writing, your artwork, and illustrate your writing with your artwork, with your concrete art. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. I'm wondering where you think you might go with your art.
Yeah, so I think, yes, this baby is going to be on the outside in 8 weeks. And my plan is to take a little sabbatical from my, full-time work with this income and lean into the art in a way I've never been able to do before. So I'm really excited about that. And I do I write a lot of poetry. And it's having the small sort of bite-sized writing. I feel like I'm sort of gestating some idea of how to incorporate that into the concrete and into my artwork. And it's just one of those things, like my process is I really just start playing around and see what happens. And that's kind of how I discover like what works or what I like. So it's like the idea is there kind of swirling around, but I really need to just start getting tactile with it. So I don't know what's going to happen, but there's thoughts on that. And I also I tend to gravitate, I have found the plants that work best for what I'm doing, like structurally, and that work best for my garden, like the best pollinators and the best, the plants that feel good to grow, because they're helping the birds and the bees. And so I have thought of, doing some writing about just showcasing my favorite plants, like coneflower. I grow a ton of echinacea, purple coneflower, and it's hardy. It self-seeds. You can leave the seed pods to feed, critters throughout the winter. There's so much I love about it. So showcasing that in art, and then also maybe having some accompanying, writing about why I love it, and sort of how to grow in your garden, kind of incorporating some education in there too with the artwork. That's something that's kind of I've been thinking about. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Do you draw or paint? Do you have any other artistic outlets, Liz?
I do not, but I'm very paint curious, I'll say. And that is from the gallery show I had. I did do some just painting of pieces, just one color with the gold leafing on the plant. And that felt really good. But for some reason, I think it's because I wasn't that kid that was drawing, that everyone was like, you're an artist. I have it in my head that I'm not. I still struggle even using the word artist to describe myself sometimes. So I feel the pull of paint. That's something I want to do, but I'm working up the, I guess, the confidence and the courage to do that. That's part of me that feels well, I have to take a class first. I have to learn about paint.
Well, maybe your children can teach you. I mean, I'm sure they're doing art in school. They can.
That is, yeah. And Rowan, my daughter especially, it's cool to see her being such an intuitive artist. She's 4. She doesn't have that yet. Some people are artists and some people aren't. She just will come up with an idea and meticulously. The other day she had a piece of construction paper and cut the edge to be fringed around the whole thing, and then was painting the individual, fringes different colors. And it was so cool to see her just. No one was this is the process of the project you're doing. She was just playing around, and she made something that was really neat. So not only Seamus is probably getting some instruction from his art teacher, that I could tap into or ask him about, but just seeing them be so bold and confident.
Original. Yeah.
Original. Yeah. And just this isn't about the final, it's not about the outcome for her. It was just about the process. She was just maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do this. And
well, one day down in the future, if someone asks her, well, is there any artists in the family, they can say, well, my mom was a concrete artist.
Yeah. It was really neat to have them come see the gallery show. That was a pretty special experience. And it's cool that if I do, if Seamus sometimes is oh, I'm not good at this, or, I can be hey, I didn't know I was an artist till I was in my late 30s.
There you go.
It's neat to have that example of you never know. You just do the thing. And
you never know. You never know. Well, tell everybody where they can find your art on social media, Liz.
Yeah, I'm very bad at self-promotion, but I do have an Instagram. It's Gray Day Goods, Gray with an A. So Instagram.com/Gray Day Goods is where I'll post pictures of the art I make. I post poems sometimes, pictures of my garden. So I feel that is the easiest way to find my work and to contact me. And then, someday I'll make a website. When I have my sabbatical, I'll have the time to.
I'm wondering if you would take commissions then with your concrete art.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something I've thought about. I think that would be really fun and satisfying is I know people have flowers or plants that are meaningful to them. And I think it would be so cool to get to do projects like that for people, like, or if, you know, you have a garden, your mother's garden, like secretly snip some things from your mother's garden and get them to me. And then I'll make her a piece of artwork that's like showcasing her plants. Like that feels like something that's very aligned with like what I want to do. So,
putting everything together here.
Open for commissions. Yeah.
Totally. All right. Well, you heard it here on the Art Podcast. You can find Liz on Instagram at Grade A Goods, as she mentioned. Don't forget Gray's with an A. And the Art Podcast is, of course, 2 A's. That's the Art Podcast on Instagram. And if you're just listening to us on your podcast app, don't forget to go over to our YouTube channel, look for the Art Podcast, and subscribe, follow. You can comment there. Of course, we'd always love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions for guests, do drop us a line too at theartpodcast@gmail.com. And follow Liz. And Liz, good luck with everything you're doing, with the baby and with your sabbatical, and then returning to work and returning to your art. And thank you for taking time to come on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been really fun, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
Well, talking is good on a podcast, I always say.
There you go.
Well, thanks again, Liz, and thanks to you for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode of the Art Podcast. And if you are on your podcast app, please do give us a 5-star review and a rating there, because that does make a difference to our visibility and it helps others to find the show. But for now, thanks from me and from Liz for joining us this week. Until next time, thank you for listening.